In today's episode, Fern shares a heartwarming story of receiving messages from a loved one who had since passed away.
Hi, I'm Fern. I'm from Thanet in Kent. I am a freelance photographer by trade, and I love boating, music, Ghostbusters, obviously. I run a local cosplay group where we do charity events and appearances to raise money for local charities and Evelina Children's Hospital. I've always been interested in the paranormal ever since I was a really young child. In our house, my dad had lots of books on ghosts and the paranormal, and especially ghost hauntings in and around Kent. Instead of doing my homework, I would be reading his books off the shelf when I should have been doing schoolwork, and that was fascinating to me, the whole thing about the paranormal. I had a bit of a difficult childhood, but me and my dad was mainly the only thing we really bonded over was those books, and me saying to my dad that I wanted him to take me to these places that I read about as a child. And ever since then, I've just been hooked on the paranormal. I was always trying to find a scientific explanation for things as well, so I'm very grounded with that. I do believe that, if you want to call it, there are ghosts. I believe there are spirits. I believe there are guides somewhere on another realm by our side. I do believe in all of that. But sometimes when I have done ghost hunts in the past, I go and look, if there's something happens, I go and look for a possible scientific reason to a noise or to a movement or to the wind blowing or and hitting something, or that's just an example. I will always go and try and think, well, what else could it be? And a lot of the time I can't come up with a scientific explanation a lot of the time, which has only made me sort of believe more and more over the years that there is something actually out there. I used to go as a child, before I could drive or go anywhere or anything like that, I would go as a child with a couple of friends who didn't actually think that I was a bit weird and at school, because I was kind of an outsider at school, like the ghost girl who's into ghosts. And when Ghostbusters came out, I was actually 11 years old, and I watched that film and thought, wow, there's a film that actually gets me. And then I watched how the guys in the film did their investigations, and it gave me a few ideas. So we would go out, me and a couple of friends, like I say, who weren't, they were like me. They weren't as run-of-the-mill as other people, just didn't believe, didn't want to get involved with that sort of thing, didn't want to think about an afterlife. And we would go to local graveyards and see if we could listen for things. We had headphones on with microphones, listening for noises, which now I know is known as EVP. I started to do paranormal investigations again when I was living in Cornwall about 15 years ago. And we did a couple of investigations there with a few of my friends, my newfound friends that I'd found in that area. And we looked up a local ghost hunt company, and we started doing it again. And ever since then, from 15 years ago, when I got back into it and got a taste for it again, I've been going to them fairly regularly. I go to an organised one maybe once or twice a year if I can. And aside from that, I might go off and do my own investigations at places like Reculver's quite good on the Kent coast. Just places that I get to hear about and try and sort of collate any information about anything. Read about the history as well. Because of the ghost hunting thing, it makes you want to get into the history of a place. And I find the history of places also fascinating as well. I would take with me, I've got EVP, a recorder. I have an EMF meter. I have a SLS camera, and then basically your senses, your smell, your hearing, what you see all around you. I also just carry a camera with me as well, with a flash, and I have caught orbs on camera, zoomed right in to see if it could be dust or flies. But again, that's the science bit coming through to try and explain it away, and some of the things, the way that the orbs or the particles move across the camera, it just can't be dust. When I've been on ghost hunts, things that have happened, I have table tipping, and so when you've put your hands on the table, you can feel it shake and move, and there's only probably another couple of people with their fingers on that table, and you are watching all the time their hands as well, because you're thinking this isn't really happening. And sometimes the people haven't even got their fingers on the table, it's just above. So you feel that there is maybe some energy that is being drawn from us to move an object. I've had a table walk up the middle of an aisle, literally walking with very few hands upon it, and then I asked for the table to be thrown. He wasn't very impressed, but at my husband at the end of the aisle, and it flipped over and threw it at him. And I've had orbs, I've had things thrown at me when there's been nobody behind me, bits of stone, and sometimes we use marbles and we roll them down and they get thrown back and there's nobody there. So you can't just maybe say that that's just the wind, because it can't pick up a stone or a marble and throw it down, and directioned at you as well. And on another ghost hunt, I had a bottle of water in my bag. I went away and did an investigation for about 45 minutes, came back to my bag. It was in the middle of a theatre in Thanet, and it was in my rucksack, and I hid it under the seat. Everybody was out investigating. Everybody was out doing various sections of that theatre. I came back 45 minutes later and the bottle of water in my bag was frozen solid through. There is no way, even if you put a bottle of water in a freezer, because again, I went home, scientifically tried to do this, put it in the freezer, and even in 2 hours it still wasn't frozen all the way through. This was rock solid frozen. I think the most active place I've been to is the Guildhall in Sandwich. Now downstairs is an old courtroom where they used to try people going back a few centuries, and if they were found guilty of certain crimes, they were then hanged in the village square, which was just outside of the Guildhall. So as you can imagine, there was probably some very nasty people that passed through that room that were sentenced there. So we've had good and bad spirits. That's actually where the table was walking up the middle of the room and then flipped over on my command. And that is a very active room, and that is a very active building. It's a good one to go and visit if you ever get the chance. So my particular story that I wanted to talk about was quite personal to me. After investigating the paranormal and being interested in it for many years, it actually hit a real nerve with me once my mum passed away in 2015. She died very suddenly, there was no warning, and she was fairly young, 66. She'd only been retired 8 months when she passed. Now, I have been told by certain people that when someone passes over, it may take a while for them to show you possible signs that they're still there, because they need to get adjusted to where they are once they pass away, and it could take some time. But once she'd passed away, I was in complete shock for a long time, and I wasn't expecting anything to come through, not this early in the game. But a couple of weeks after she passed away, we were still waiting to do the funeral. We hadn't even had the funeral yet. Before she died, she bought me some festival tickets to go to a festival with my husband down in Cornwall, to see various artists playing at this festival, and one of the artists was one of her favourite artists, which is an artist called C6 Steve. People might have heard of him. And whilst I was sitting on the grass waiting for C6 Steve to start, my husband went off and got some drinks, and I was just sitting there, and a white feather dropped right next to me. Okay, there's seagulls around, could have dropped there, but why right next to me? I was wearing her sun hat at the time as well, because it was quite a sunny day. So I took the feather and something just said to me, just keep hold of it. So I stuck it in the little straw hat that was hers and I kept it. So that was the first thing I think that made me think, okay, I can maybe put it down to something, but that's a bit strange. It's almost like she was sitting herself next to me, because when we used to go to festivals together and concerts, like my mum was a bit of a party animal. She would come to concerts and everything with me, and she'd have her place beside me and shouting and cheering and everything else. So I wondered if at that moment, just as it was about to start, that was her sitting next to me. That's what I felt. And then I just sort of carried on. And while I was also at this festival, they had big speakers all around the complex of where the festival was taking place. She was, and always was, as far as I can remember, a fan of the Rolling Stones. It was her favourite band. They were playing quite modern music on these amps going around, and as I walked past one of them, suddenly Brown Sugar kicked in by the Rolling Stones, just as I walked past that one speaker. And then I thought, okay, that's a bit weird. You've been playing kind of modern music all day, and now you're playing the Rolling Stones, suddenly the Brown Sugar. So that was a bit strange as well. Again, almost like she was walking beside me at this festival, and she did love, like I say, a good concert, a good festival. After that, I think a couple of days after that festival, we were on our way home. But the night before we came home, I had a very vivid dream about my mum. The first vivid dream I'd had about her since she passed. I went to bed every night after she passed wishing I could dream about her, just to try and remember her face, her voice, and nothing ever came. And then the day before we left Cornwall to come back for her funeral to Kent, I had a very vivid dream. She was turned up at the door of my old childhood house where we grew up. We hadn't lived there for years, but she was there knocking on the door, and I was just so shocked to see her, because I said, well, I thought you'd died. And she says, don't be silly, I'm not dead. I'm not dead. No, I'm not. Can I come in? This is my house. And I said, yeah, but I thought you'd gone. And she said, no. She said, I drove here. There's my car. And she pointed over to the car, and the car wasn't a car she'd ever owned. It was a white Honda. I'm being very specific because we used to have one in black, but it was a white Honda CRZ. It was a coupe car. It was in white. And she said, yeah, that's my car there. Can you let me in? I want to come in. I'm exhausted. I've come a long way. So, and that was it. And then the dream just finished. And then driving home the next day, we stopped over at a services. I was just sitting in the window of this diner, and suddenly another favourite band of hers was Queen. She loved Queen, the band. We were just sitting in the diner, and a white Honda CRZ pulled into the car park right in front of the windows. They're very uncommon, they're not common cars. Exactly with the black wheels, exactly how it was in my dream. And over the radio in the diner came Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. That was it. I just thought, okay, right, this is very, very strange. I was then convinced by that point there was 3 signs that there was something going on here, that she was trying to maybe reach out to me. One example with the feather, you can probably say, well, that was a seagull flying over, it came at the right time. 2, yes, they could have just switched it to that music at that time. That could be coincidence, a very massive coincidence, but that was that. When I saw that, I just thought, and literally there was another song playing, and then Queen just cut in halfway through the song, Don't Stop Me Now. And I heard it, and I actually said to my husband, can you hear that song? And he went, yes, Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. And I thought, it's not just me hearing things because I'm longing to see her again. By that point, I thought there's something in this. And it was quite comforting to know that she was there and she was having a good time with me, and there was nothing to worry about. She wasn't in any pain or distress. That's how I felt inside, because I was kind of worried before that, you know, if she was in pain, distress, if she wanted to come back to me, she didn't want to go when it was time for her to go. I was worried about a lot of things with her and how she would be once she'd passed over. The other thing that happened was we went back to the Guildhall at Sandwich for a ghost hunt. I'm probably talking about 6 months down the line after this all happened. So she'd had the funeral, she'd been gone about 6 or 7 months. And when you go to somewhere like that that's absolutely steeped in history, and you go along and you do a spirit board, which I have done in the past, I thought nothing of it to take part down in the courtroom again with the spirit board. The planchette started moving around and doing various things. And then suddenly we said, right, it wasn't really doing anything. It was moving, but it wasn't really being specific. And then we just asked, there was me and about 3 others on the board. And they said, who do you want to talk to? And the planchette pointed to me. Thinking, uh-oh, is it an evil spirit or is it something not good and it wants me and, maybe. And they said, who are you? And it spelled out the word S-U-E, which is the name of my mum. And at that point, I started to get a bit goosebumpy, and I thought, well, okay, someone could be moving this planchette who's seen my Facebook profile, maybe social media. You can probably pick up lots of things and people can manipulate things. Also, before all this happened, I used to wear my mum's watch after she died. It kept stopping at 4 p.m. Or 4 o'clock. It kept stopping at that time. About 3 times it stopped, and I had to keep going back to the jewellers and getting new batteries because it kept stopping at the time. That was about the time that she passed away. So I asked on the spirit board, okay, if this is really you, where was I today to do with something connected to you? And that day I'd been to the jewellers again to change the battery because it had stopped at 4 p.m. again. No one else knew where I'd been because I just nipped out for about 15 minutes to go and get this done. There was no need for me to say to anybody or put it up on social media. It was just another trip to the jewellers to change a battery for a watch, which I thought was probably on the blink. And I said, where have I been today? And it started to spell out the word jewellers. That point I was convinced. I'd told nobody else about that. And then I said, I want to know that you're okay. And she said, yes, I am okay. There was a lot of things going on in my life with my dad who was left behind once my mum died. There's a lot of things going on at that time with my dad. And I said, am I doing all the right things? Am I doing all the right organisation now that you used to do? Mum was always the organiser. She was the glue that held everything together. And I said, am I doing everything right? And she said, yes. And I said, is there anything else? I said, okay. And I thought, I'm really going to test you now. I'm going to ask you what my childhood nickname was. And I've never told anybody who was there present because it's an embarrassing nickname. I'll say it on camera though. My nickname as a child was Wee Wee. Because obviously as a child, like most people, I grew up when I was a child, I wet the bed. So my dad called me Wee Wee. And then that was it. It just stuck after that. And I said, what was a nickname that Dad always called me? And she started to spell out W-E. And I went, okay, you can stop now. I didn't want anybody else to know, but she knew. And then I just said, look, is there anything else you want to say to me? And she just said, proud of you. And that was it. That was it then. I just went to pieces and started crying. A lot of stuff came out that I think I'd been holding back for some reason. With the passing of my mum, there was just so much to organise after she died. I don't think I ever had any time to grieve. It was all a bit like a roller coaster. And it was almost like she'd uncorked the bottle in me and it was just... And I think that's what she maybe wanted to try and do. And since that point where she contacted me, I've been to mediums and spiritualists and to try and get more out of her. And I've had bits and pieces come through, but nothing quite as convincing as that spirit board session where she spoke to me. And again, I hear that when you do spirit boards, sometimes there are things called shapeshifters. And they pretend to be somebody who you've lost to try and sort of worm their way into a place or a setting. That's why I asked her the questions that only she would know. And for me, even scientifically thinking about it, there is no way that a couple of those questions that I asked, there is no way that anyone else can know. Only her, if she was there with me, over my shoulder. Yeah, it was a real moment for me, but a convincing moment. At the time that she came through on the spirit board, I was with one of my best friends, and I was with another friend at the time. when I started crying, because it had all just seemed to be released from me, my best friend took me into her arms, and she is actually quite a strict Church of England supporter. So sometimes that's frowned upon in the Church of England community, to go ghost hunting, to try and find something else other than God or Jesus or whatever you might believe in. But she actually said to me, I don't know how that happened, I don't know how that worked, but all I know is that it was almost like that message came through to you to help you just let go a little bit, and you're my friend, and all I care about is you just being you, and if you've got to let it out and not bottle it in because that doesn't help you, if you can do that, then it doesn't matter what you believe in, whatever, as long as it's made you feel better. My husband wasn't with me at the time of this ghost hunt, but I went home and told him, and he said exactly the same as what I was thinking, which was, that's just too much of a coincidence, like a few of the answers that were coming out that you haven't put up on social media. Other people who, let's say skeptics, who I know were not so convinced, felt like maybe there was a stooge who had their fingers on the planchet and was moving it. But then I said, but there's things that they couldn't possibly know which letters to go to. And they wouldn't say anything. They'd be on the fence about it, put it that way. But I know deep down that was a sign from her. I have no doubt in my mind. And even when it's very close to home like that, like one of your own relatives, especially somebody who you were very, very close to, I can understand people saying, well, you want to believe it because that's what you want to hear, because you want to feel comforted. It's almost like your subconscious is moving that planchet to those places. But I'll be honest, at the time of having my finger on that planchet, it wasn't even really on there very much. And if it was on there quite hard, I would have thought maybe I was just willing it in my mind. But it was hardly touching it. I think ever since that my mum reached out to me and did it in the way that she did and the methods that she did, because then that was almost, even though other things have happened that I can't explain on ghost hunts, it almost makes me thirsty for more, to tell, for people from the other side to tell their stories, because they want them to be told. Now, whether that's just relating to a place and they felt that they were wrongly done, or yes, I want to confess that this happened, or whether they want to reach out to another member of their family that's present at that ghost hunt or that place, I just think that, well, why not? You know, let them get it all out in the open. And if they've got that message, I just want to pursue it more and more and more, because it's like me doing this now. Telling a story, it just lets it out a bit more, and it's helpful. It's helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for other people as well, to say, you know, if you've lost someone close to you, if you go to certain places, you do certain things, you keep your mind open and you keep yourself open to it, then maybe the answer will come when you least expect it, because I never expected it to come from such an active place like the Guildhall. I didn't go out that night and say, I'm going to go and get in touch with my mum. I just thought we'd get in touch with loads and loads of spirits from connected to that place, because so much has happened there. So much history is steeped around that place. So if you just remain open to it, and that night I was open to it, not to my mum particularly, but I was open, you just got to be open to it and just try these things. You know, just try it. And that's now just given me more fuel to keep going with it, because I now believe, yes, sometimes there are scientific reasons for things, but also I think, you know, there is something there, and we have to investigate it further to try and understand maybe what happens to us after we pass.